I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. Food security is a critical part of the fight against global poverty, and it cuts across all of the issues that we're talking about here today, from issues about global health to issues of women's empowerment to issues of national security. And in fact, just recently, the last couple of weeks, we as a community had a very significant victory in the passage of the Global Food Security Act. Yes, that deserves applause. Yeah. And its signature into law last week, and so that is a real milestone, and we'll talk a bit about that over the next few minutes. CARES was part of that effort for over a decade of trying to get those kinds of policies into place. Very proud to have partnered with both of you and all of you in the room to help get that bill over the final line. It was a push at the end to finally make it happen, but excited to see it now finally enacted into law. So we couldn't really have two more perfect people to talk to us about this issue. A combination of folks who bring both the public policy world together along with the advocacy world, and so you have heard their introductions. As you heard, Raj was the administrator of USAID for most of the current presidential administration, and was the real champion, I'd say, of returning a focus at the U.S. federal government level to food security issues around hunger and nutrition, and really championed many of the policies that are now enacted into law, enshrined in law in the Global Food Security Act. Carla, as you saw from the video, is not only a world-renowned and celebrity chef, but yes, world-renowned, exactly, but also a very powerful advocate for these issues, and we were very pleased to have Carla travel with us to Mozambique now just a little over
it was just a year ago, and I cleaned my skirt from the mud so I wore this to let you know that it was clean.
So we have two great speakers to speak with us about these issues here today. Raj, I'll start with you. Can you say a little bit more about what it was that drove you and the Obama administration more broadly to return a focus to issues around food security and agriculture and nutrition, and to make that such a priority in your work at USAID?
Well, thank you, David, and I'm excited to be here with you and with Carla, and I also am thrilled Maria Otero is here, another colleague from the administration. Look, I think at the end of the day, I suspect everyone in this room is already on the bandwagon, right? And the reason Hillary and the president felt strongly about reinvesting America's global leadership in the fight against hunger is because they felt we could be successful. And they felt very strongly, and Secretary Clinton felt extraordinarily strongly, that it is important to project America's values around the world, not just through our words, but through our actions. And so, President Obama in his inaugural address made a commitment that we would help small farmers improve their agricultural production as part of a global fight against hunger. Secretary Clinton, in her very first trips to Africa and elsewhere, launched Feed the Future, and we put the program together. And just look at what has happened in 6 or 7 years. The new Feed the Future report results will come out in a few days, but more than 9 million farm households have been helped. Their yields have gone up considerably. That means 45 million people are moving out of poverty through direct assistance, not because anyone's given them a handout, but rather because they've been encouraged to be more productive in their own day-to-day economic activities and in their own labors. I look at the Feed the Future results with just awe. I mean, I look at 2-3 year results of 12, 14, 18, 26% reductions in poverty rates and in child stunting. I'd remind everyone that 5, 6, 7 years ago, people didn't even think you could bring down stunting that fast. But it's happened in Ethiopia, it's happened in Senegal, it's happened in Liberia, it's happened in country after country. And most importantly, we measured those results, and I can use those numbers with the confidence that we know that our dollars and our actions have had that impact on those societies, and most importantly, on the children in those countries. Given that track record of extraordinary and specific results, it's not surprising to me that Republicans and Democrats came together and overwhelmingly passed a $7 billion Global Food Security Act authorization a few weeks ago. When the president spoke at USAID just last week, I take it, he was celebrating the fact that he signed the bill. He said, I signed the bill this morning, and everyone erupted in cheers. And he paused and said, well, you didn't think I wasn't going to sign it, did you? It did come to me after years and years and years of hard work. And I guess the lesson here is, in my view, we're about to have an administration that will have more global preparation and global leadership in its president and vice president, in Secretary Clinton and Tim Kaine, than you can imagine on any ticket that has ever run for office. And for folks who care about the fight against hunger, that care about the fight against extreme poverty, that believe now is the time to achieve the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, you will never be better placed, ever, to be bold in your thinking, to be results-oriented in your execution, and to be open-minded in building bridges across party lines to pass legislation to make this stuff work, not just now, but for decades to come. And that's the task ahead for all of us together. It's a really exciting one.
Well, you saw, Carla, these programs at work firsthand when you were in Mozambique. We saw a little bit about that in the video. Can you say a little bit about what you learned from that experience and how that is translated into your advocacy around these issues?
Well, it was my first trip to the southern part of Africa, and I was just excited. The thing that drew me in was working with women and empowering women. As someone who has come from a single-family home, and there are just a lot of women in my family, and having my own business, that was the first and foremost. To see these women and to see the program where it was, there were some women who had been going through the program for 4 years in the farming community, and this woman was asking how can she feed her child more nutritious meals, and you would think that that's just a simple thing. But 4 years prior, she was just learning how to grow the orange sweet potatoes and not just cassava, where her kids were just being, their bellies were being full, but they were still malnutritioned. And so now they're having green beans, and they're having these levels, different levels of food and the variety of food. And she is the president in her community. And then you have these other women who are learning how to, grow things, and then actually having businesses and learning how they can have seedlings and take those to the market. So you can actually see these families who are thriving versus the slash and burning that they used to do, and where they would go in and they would just basically grow something and then just burn it all up, and they have to move somewhere else. But now, sustainable farming, and that is something that their kids are going to grow into, and they're going to be all about that farming. When you think about in the States, how when I talk to people and they have their children and they're 10 years old and they're all about food and they love to cook. It's because they have grown up looking at these food television shows. So put that in another country where you see your parents and they're farming and it's sustainable and they are proud, and so you are changing a community, you're changing a village and a community and a country. So looking at all of that and actually eating in someone's home, even though it is an outdoor kitchen, and how clean it is. And you think, okay, there's a dirt floor, but they are washing every little thing, and everything is clean. And I'm there with 3 other chefs, Kat Cora and Spike Mendelsohn and Antonio LaFossa, and they're smashing the garlic and salt. And we're like, oh, they're smashing the garlic and salt. We do that. And we don't need words. We don't need words to basically communicate. It's just these actions and things that they're doing that we're doing, and it is the common language of actually cooking. And that was so exciting, and we're like, yes, and that's what chefs do, and this is how we nurture people. So moving forward and coming back to now my restaurant, I am looking at the people that I hire. And we have hired 61-year-old girls. We've hired 50-year-olds, 45-year-olds, people that you wouldn't think, who haven't worked in restaurants before, that you wouldn't think to hire. Because I know by hiring those women, I am making a difference in their lives, and they're actually helping me to model work ethic to the younger people.
You and I had the pleasure of having lunch downstairs at the Reading Terminal Market. If you haven't eaten there, you should definitely take advantage of that while you're in Philadelphia.
So good.
Yeah. And we were talking about that common experience of sharing a meal and connecting just over our basic shared humanity and the kind of things that we all want for our own lives, for our children, for our communities, and how fundamental that is. And Raj, this issue particularly about the importance of women in the success of these kinds of programs, of reducing stunting, of increasing agricultural productivity, increasing the quality of the food that people have to eat, increasing incomes, I know has been a very central part of Feed the Future and the programs that you were promoting when you were at USAID. Can you just say a little bit more about that and how you see that evolving as the program goes forward?
Sure. Well, as we created something called the Women's Empowerment Index to be able to know whether income gains from agricultural support to households were going primarily to women or men. And we were all, of course, very committed to making sure that they went to women, because the statistical reality is $1 of income for women is much more likely to be invested in sending kids to school, improving nutrition of that family, and putting the family on a pathway out of poverty. And as much as I hate to say this for my gender, it is statistically true that that same dollar in the man's hand is far less impactful for that pathway out of poverty. It's just reality. So we found actually after the first few years of the program that even with our best intentions, most of the benefits were still accruing to men. And wonderful leaders like Jada Doyen and Beth Dunford and others at USAID made some structural changes in the programs to make sure that we were designing the types of interventions and tools like irrigation pumps that were easier for women to use, or working on the types of crops like beans in particular that are more closely associated with women's incomes and women's empowerment. And we start to see a big shift in performance. And that kind of learning and doing better, in my view, is important in all of this work. But I do want to come back to something Carla said about our common humanity expressed in that shared experience of cooking together or sharing a meal together. It sounds so right, and it sounds so straightforward, and it seems so human. And yet, I couldn't help but be terrified watching in Mr. Trump's acceptance speech the language around refugees. And right now, I believe that kind of tone that says people who are coming out of refugee-affected areas and are actually refugees or internally displaced people should be feared and resented and avoided, as opposed to embraced and supported. That, to me, is a microcosm of the choice in this election. And I'm going to go out on a limb and assume most people in this room are supporting Secretary Clinton to be next president. But I do think it is incumbent on all of us to use our voice with our friends in our communities. We have a global refugee crisis right now that we have never seen at this scale, more than 60 million refugees. Almost all of those are women and girls. And if we start saying they're all, it's both inaccurate and wrong to label that group as dangerous, but it allows people, even good people in this country, to then put a wall up and say, we don't have to help them. We actually have to help them. And the common humanity Carla is talking about has to be expressed in those moments, person to person, but also in our policies and our leaders. And we all have to use our voice to make sure that we don't have the refugee crisis undermine all the great work that's taken place over the last decades under Republicans and Democrats, right? On AIDS, on food security, on malaria, on all of our developmental efforts. And that's our responsibility in these next few months. Well,
sadly, I've been signaled that our time is up. So I want to thank you both for your leadership around these issues and really making the world a better, healthier, happier place for all of us. And it's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with you both. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you all.
Thank you.